Yo, it's your boy, back at it like a bass addict, and I was feeling like I needed to bring back this series that I used to do on my channel where I just go really in depth on different baits for different seasons of the year, and just share the full rundown on baits, colors, where I like to use them, rod, reel, line, the whole 9 yards. And I kind of stopped doing them just because they weren't pulling the most views, but I think the people who were interested in those videos got a lot out of them. I had people give me feedback saying that it helped them catch some fish out there. So I'm gonna bring it back and just kind of go into some seasonal baits that I like to use that might help y'all catch some more fish. So we're kind of transitioning, at least out here in Northern California, we're transitioning out of winter and into early spring. So the night temps are starting to come up, the days are getting longer, we're having more light, and those fish are definitely on the move. They're definitely moving towards their spawning areas. I'm not going to say they're thinking about spawning yet. It's still a little too cold, but they're definitely moving in that direction, and they're going to start feeding up before the spawn. So today I wanted to talk about chatterbaits, one of my favorite baits pretty much any time of year, but especially this time of year. Chatterbaits are notorious for catching giant fish, or bladed jigs, I guess I should say, but the chatterbait is kind of the one that most people know. But without further ado, let's get into it. So first thing I'll talk about is just the areas that I like to target and the way I like to approach things out there on my fisheries with the chatterbait. So obviously, like I said, we're talking about this winter to spring transition. So the fish are going to be moving from their deeper winter areas and moving towards their shallower spawning areas. So pockets, flats, creek arms, things like that. And so anything in between is really fair game this time of year. Stuff that they're going to stop on kind of on their way, their little highway to their spawning areas. So that could be main lake points, that could be rock piles, that could be weed lines. It really just depends on your fishery. For me, a lot of my fisheries hold grass year round, so they might be sitting in the mud or out on a rock pile during the winter, and then they're just going to make a small move to that first weed edge, that deeper weed edge, and they're going to sit on that. And so you can throw a heavier chatterbait and kind of cover those weed lines, pick some of those fish off that are just positioned there on their way up and looking to feed. So the good thing about this time of year is when they're spawning, they're not going to be eating a lot. So right before the spawn, that pre-spawn period is the best time to catch a giant fish. They're just gorging on whatever they can get their mouths on, because the spawn is just really strenuous. It puts a lot of stress on their bodies, and so they want to bulk up before that happens. So they're usually pretty aggressive, and I think that's probably why something like a chatterbait that has a lot of aggressive vibration seems to trigger them this time of year. But yeah, like I said, those deeper grass lines, also like just rock piles. You find good rock piles outside of those spawning areas, that's stuff that they'll sit on. It might be just one good fish, or you might find a group of them sitting on a rock pile that you can kind of pick off. But that's a great place to target. Up on Clear Lake, like those deeper docks seem to be something that they'll stage on, or that deeper flooded brush. Up north, that's stuff that they'll get on as they're making their push in towards the creeks or towards the pockets where they're going to spawn. So yeah, like I said, it really just depends on your fishery and how things lay out, what structure is available. But really just think about the areas that you're catching them in the winter, and then the areas that you caught them last spring, and then start looking in between. And that's what's really worked for me in years past, for sure. So the way that I like to approach things this time of year, is really by covering a lot of water. In the wintertime, I'm not necessarily fishing slow, but I'm fishing a little more methodical, breaking areas down, making more precise casts on different structure elements. As we move into the spring transition, as the water warms, as the days get longer, as these fish kind of wake up and get more aggressive, I'm just going to cover water. You're trying to find where they're at because they're moving right now. I was up at Clear Lake and we're catching them on the minnow, we're catching them in like 25 feet of water, and then they're gone. So you can definitely tell fish are on the move, and not just Clear Lake, all the fisheries, the fish are on the move. They're moving towards their spawning areas. They're thinking about feeding up for the spawn. So making sure that I'm not just sitting on one spot that I caught them a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and just dragging something around. I'm covering water. I'll probably start on the deeper side of something, and then I'll work my way shallow. Sometimes they'll be shallower than you are expecting them to be this time of year. Not necessarily to spawn, but just to feed. They'll push up to feed, and sometimes they'll catch you off guard. You think they're out deeper, and they're really just up on the bank. So you can get up around that type of stuff and throw a chatterbait, cover water, fan cast in these high percentage areas that I talked about, and it's just a really good way to find fish. So even if they're not necessarily eating it and the chatterbait isn't the ticket for the day, they'll bump it, they'll get behind it, and you'll kind of get that weird feeling in your blade. You know something's up. So they'll definitely show themselves, just because that vibration is going to call those fish in. So definitely make sure you're covering water this time of year until you find fish. And then if you want to slow down and drag something or really pick an area apart, you can do that. But making sure you're not stuck on one area until you actually find fish. So that's the approach that I take. Now let's talk about the actual baits and how I'm fishing them. So obviously the bladed jig category is pretty vast at this point, but it all kind of goes back to the chatterbait. So Z-Man is kind of the number one. I throw a few other brands, but for the most part it's mostly Z-Man. So I'm throwing that Jackhammer, I'm throwing that EVO, and then on occasion I will mix in the Strike King Thunder Cricket. It's just different blade shape, different vibration, and sometimes you need something different. A lot of people throw the Z-Man chatterbaits, a lot of people throw the Jackhammer, and so those fish get conditioned to that exact vibration. So throwing something different can definitely get you a couple more bites sometimes. My previous PB up until last year was on the Strike King Thunder Cricket, so it definitely catches big fish. But I think the Z-Man is probably the more consistent bait, and just got better components overall. But yeah, so those are the ones I like. They have a good startup speed. They don't rise super crazy. Obviously all chatterbaits are gonna kind of want to plane up towards the surface, but they stay down pretty good. I throw for the most part a 1/2 ounce, unless I'm fishing shallower and I really want to creep it, then I might go down to a 3/8, just so I'm not dragging bottom or getting bogged up in the weeds. But yeah, Chatterbait EVO, Z-Man Jackhammer, and then the Strike King Thunder Cricket, and then really, like I said, just covering water. I'm casting it out. If I have kind of clean bottom or sparse grass, I'll just let it sink all the way down. I'll pop it up, and then I'll start my retrieve. This time of year I tend not to burn it unless the fish tell me that's how they want it, but I'll kind of start it with a slow roll, keeping that bait at a good pace, feeling that thump in my rod, and then every once in a while I'll kind of speed up my reel, get that bait to kick off and kind of hunt a little bit. And a lot of times that's going to be the trigger for your bite, just getting that bait to dance, do something erratic, because those fish, they'll follow it, they'll get in that trance of just feeling the vibration of that bait, And when it does something weird, it looks like it's trying to get away, that's when they're gonna grab onto it. You can also hop it on the bottom, kind of like a LV or a jig, just stroking a jig, and just pull it up, feel that vibration, let it fall back down. Pull it up, feel that vibration, let it fall back down. And so if you're not getting bit on a wind, you can try slowing down and getting those fish to eat off the bottom. I've had some success catching some big ones doing that too. So playing with your retrieve, like any bait, every day is different, so make sure you mix it up until you figure out what those fish want, and then you can really dial it in and get to whacking them. But those are the two baits that I like. I'm not going to dive into trailers just because that's a big rabbit hole for me at least, but I will link some of my favorite trailers down below for y'all to check out. Everything will be linked in the description, so you can go down there and find what you need to find. Next thing I'll talk about is color. For the most part, I keep it pretty simple. I just have 3 kind of color categories. You got your craws, so your reds, black and red, orange and red, you know, green pumpkin red, whatever. You got your shad patterns, so your whites, white chartreuses, green pumpkin shad, stuff like that. Your bait fish imitators, and then you got your bluegill patterns, your green pumpkins, and then just, you know, your bluegill pattern. It's got a little bit of purple in there, some orange, some blue, and I keep it that simple. For the most part, anywhere in the country, those 3 color groups are gonna cover you. Pretty much everywhere has one of those 3 things. So if I'm out on the Delta, a lot of times I'm throwing something craw based, especially in the spring. Those fish like to key on crawfish, so anything with a red, green pumpkin red, black and red does really well out there. If I'm up at Clear Lake, those fish, they key on bait fish a lot of times, or they have been at least recently. So your thread fin imitators, just your kind of standard whites. You can throw white and chartreuse if you've got a little more stained water. If you're targeting those hitch eaters, like up on Clear Lake on the north end, I'll throw like a green pumpkin shad, something with a darker back with a white belly, and that'll do great. But anything with a white is going to be a good bait fish imitator. You don't have to get super specific. It's a moving bait. They're not getting a huge look at it anyways. They're really just keying on that vibration more than anything. But you want to have the basic color pattern down, so something with a white base. And then lastly, those bluegill patterns, like I said. So green pumpkin is like kind of the go-to probably. They'll eat that pretty much anywhere. Just standard green pumpkin, no flake, no other colors in there. They'll pretty much always eat that. But if you want to get something more fancy, Z-Man has some of those more intricate bluegill patterns. Got a little bit of lighter green, some brown, some purple, you know, just, I feel like it catches us more than it catches the fish, but it does look good, and it's a pretty accurate color match to the gills in my fishery. So if you want to change it up, throw in some strands here and there, green pumpkin purple, green pumpkin orange, those do great imitating those gills if your fish are keying on panfish. But simple as that for the colors. I don't really complicate it too much. Lastly, I'll just talk about my rod, reel, and line setup really quick. With chatterbaits, it can be a little bit controversial. Different people like different setups. Kind of a large spectrum of things that you can fish with, but for me, I like a softer rod, so I throw glass. Some people don't like glass. They think it's too soft. They don't feel like they have as much feel or sensitivity knowing what their bait is doing, which is valid. It definitely is dumbed down a little bit compared to graphite, but I like kind of the softer action. I like that they can eat that bait, load up on it before I swing, and they really get it choked in their mouth, and I don't lose very many fish at all on the chatterbait. So I'll link the rod down below. It's actually in my truck right now, so I don't have it on me, but I throw the Dobyns Champion XP 736 glass. So it's a 7.3 6 power, so it's a heavy, it's a strong rod, it's got a lot of backbone. So once I get past that soft tip, it just shuts off and you're driving that hook no problem. So these bladed jigs, they have big hooks that's like kind of like a jig hook, so you do want some power, some meat, and you're going to be fishing around cover a lot of times. So I like that 6 power, but then it's a glass, so it's really soft in the tip. It'll kind of bend, they can eat it, and it'll load up slowly, and then you kind of just reel into them, sweep set, or not a sweep set. I mean, I hook them pretty good, but it's kind of a strong sweep set. And that's the rod I like. There's a cheaper option made by Daiwa, I think it's the DX, and it's pretty much the same rod. It's a 7.3 heavy, and that rod is just a little cheaper, but it's another great option. Maybe just you lose a little sensitivity compared to the Dobyns, but if you're just looking to get into chatterbaits, that's a great option. I think it's like 120, 130 bucks. So that'll be linked down below. For my reel, I like to throw a 7-1, not like a high 7-1. I think I throw a 7.1 to 1, so a low 7. I think if you have something too fast, you're just going to be moving your bait too fast. You're going to be having it higher in the water column. I like the 7-1 because I can speed it up. I can burn it if I want to, but I can also slow it down and just tick the grass, or slow roll it and bumping rocks, or whatever the case may be. So I can do kind of both things with one reel. And then a lot of times when they eat it, they're gonna slack you. They're gonna push as they're eating, coming at you, and they're gonna be pretty hot on it, and you're gonna need to reel into them before you even feel them to load up and set that hook. So that faster gear ratio allows you to kind of catch up to them a little better, so you can get a good hook in those fish. And then for line, I throw anywhere from pretty much 18 to 20. I don't really go any lower than that. Like I said, I fish a lot of grass, I fish a lot of heavy cover, so I'm not going to mess around. I know some people will throw it on 14 or 16. If you're fishing more open water, maybe you can get away with that. For me, I'm not chancing it. I don't feel like they're going to be line shy. You might get a little more vibration throwing the lighter line, so that's something to take into account. But I think the fish aren't going to be like, oh, it's not on 14 pound, I can see the 20 pound, I'm not going to eat it. I don't think that happens, and I just feel better about throwing that heavier line. So 18 to 20. If I want to keep it down a little deeper, maybe I'll throw 18, and if I'm fishing shallower, that thicker line will stay up a little higher, so I'll throw the 20. That's pretty much the deciding factor for me, or whatever's on my reel. That's what I'll throw. But I feel like maybe 18's a little better, in my opinion. Just you get a little, it stays down a little better, so I tend to go with that. But 20 is great, especially if you're around big ones. But I think that's pretty much it. I'll link all this stuff down in the description, like I said. If you like this type of video, please drop a comment, drop a like. I know it's a lot of me rambling. I'm not out on the water, I'm just in the garage talking shop, but I know some people will appreciate that. Some of y'all are just trying to learn and really get in depth about this stuff, and kind of pick my brain about what I'm doing out the water, how I'm approaching things, the baits I'm using. So yeah, if you like this kind of video, please show support. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and I'll be coming back with more of these videos. I'm kind of gonna roll this series back in. Sometimes I just can't get on the water, but I want to stay consistent with the videos. So I'll be putting out some of this educational content, and hopefully y'all can take some of what I'm sharing and go out and catch some big ones, go out and catch a new PB this spring. So appreciate y'all watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.